Hi, I'm Glenn from DIY Creators, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a modern coffee table. And I'll start by ripping these pieces down on the table saw. Being that all the pieces don't seem to be the same width, I'm gonna make sure I take off one cut off each side first. Then I'll make some adjustment on the table saw, and then I'll flip the board around and then make one final cut just to make sure that I have straight edges on both sides. And after all the pieces are cut, I'm going to set up a quick jig on my table saw so that I can get some consistency and cut in 45-degree angles. And making these miter joints is still a bit tricky even though you're setting it up on a table saw, because you have to keep this perfectly aligned so that we can get some tight miter joints. If miter joint seems to be a bit intimidating, you can always just use regular butt joints in this situation. And for these smaller pieces, I find it a bit easier using my circular saw. And with all the pieces cut, we should have 4 pieces. We should have the 2 sides and also the top and bottom. Now it will be a bit tricky to get to the inside and sand once this box is already assembled together. So prior to assembling, I'm just going to sand all the pieces down as smooth as possible. And I'll start with 120, then I'll move up to 220 grit sandpaper as final. The wood glue will play a major role when it comes to holding this entire coffee table together. You want to make sure you put wood glue on both pieces of the miter joint. Before nailing or screwing, depending on the way you put this together, you want to make sure that your joints are squared. The end result will reflect the way you start, so be sure you take your time and get this piece right. The wood glue will be doing the majority of the bonding. The nails is just a placeholder right now so we can put the box together and move on. And once this side is done, you can move on to the opposite side and do the same thing. And after the 3 sides is all glued together, I'm going to allow enough time for the glue to dry before I come back and add the final piece. And to add the final piece, I'm going to use the same process that was done previously. And since we're working with mitered corners here, the band clamp seems to work well, especially when trying to put pressure on all the corners. So I've given enough time for everything to dry, and now I'm going to come back with some wood filler and fill in all the nail heads. And if you happen to have any gaps in your mitered joint, this is probably the time to add some wood filler as well. And after the wood filler is dry, just hit it once more with a sander, sand it for the final time, then we'll take a rag, a damp rag, and wipe the surface to remove any sand dust. I actually like the light color of the wood, but if you want to stain it as well, you can totally go for it. But to put a protective coat on it, I'm going to use polyacrylic as my final top coat. As long as you follow the instructions on the can, you should be fine. In this case, I used 3 coats of the polyacrylic, and in between each coat, I used a 300 grit sandpaper and 400 on the final one. And as far as the in-between coats, I just used a hand sander and I just followed the grain on the wood, and that was pretty much it. Now of course you can always make the legs you desire or purchase the legs you desire, but for this project I really like the way the hairpin legs look, so this is what I went with for this project. I used a combination square to make sure I placed all the legs in the same spot and everything looked consistent. Each leg was placed an inch in from each side. Just pre-drill your hole and install the screws. Believe it or not, that's it for this one, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to Homedit for more content like this in the future. I'm Glenn from DIY Creators, and I'll see you next time.